Yes, the gold ultimatum. It began with a single leak, a solitary line in a secret telegram, but it was enough to send shockwaves across an entire continent. Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, was given a 2-day ultimatum: hand over 70% of the country's gold reserves or immediately pay off the nation's entire debt and interest, totaling $5.6 billion. The name at the bottom of the telegram? Donald J. Trump. At the time, he was the President of the United States, the most powerful voice in the G7 and the International Monetary Fund, IMF. But this was more than a political maneuver. It was a global economic assault disguised as back-channel diplomacy. The demand stunned not only Washington, but also the neutral G7 nations and the 19 countries of the IMF system. There was no room for negotiation or concessions, only a cold, hard ultimatum. Pay the debt or surrender half of Burkina Faso's newly mined gold. This was no negotiation. It was a direct threat aimed at the heart of Ouagadougou. The classified cable, delivered by hand through an absolutely trusted intermediary, was a coordinated effort. The G7 was represented by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and the IMF by its Bulgarian-born managing director, Kristalina Georgieva. Early in the morning on August 12, 2025, the cable was placed on the desk of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The message was sharp and unmistakable. Either allow corporations from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, backed by the IMF, to immediately begin mining and exporting 70% of the gold, or pay the staggering $5.6 billion debt. The unbreakable resolve. The total debt was a staggering $6.6 billion owed to G7 nations, plus an IMF debt of 324 million SDR, bringing the grand total to over $7 billion. The deadline was a brutal 48 hours. Refuse and face sanctions, resource blockades, and orchestrated internal destabilization. This was not diplomacy. It was a brazen act of extortion. The message, believed to be from Donald Trump, was as cold and rigid as steel. We saved you from terrorism. We fed you when you were starving. We lent you money. Now it's time to pay your debts or pay the price. But Trump miscalculated. The leader of Burkina Faso was not a man to be cowed. Traoré didn't flinch. He immediately summoned his top political and military commanders, along with his most trusted mining executives. In the meeting, his position was crystal clear. Tell the G7 and the IMF that Burkina Faso is not for sale. Within hours, the story exploded. From Lagos to Kinshasa, African media ran bold headlines. The West demands Africa's resources, and Traoré given 2-day ultimatum. The world watched, but Traoré didn't respond with a press release. He answered with strategy and resolve. For months, a massive secret had been hidden beneath the sun-scorched plains of northern Burkina Faso. It was not a rumor, but a fact. A colossal deposit of untapped mineral wealth, confirmed by a covert geological task force established by Traoré shortly after taking power. The data was fully encrypted by North Korean tech specialists, sealed until the first drill bit hit the ground. Then, the eyes of the West, specifically the US and France, spotted it. Surveillance satellites over the Sahel began picking up unusual activity. Within just 2 days, U.S. intelligence had detected strange energy signatures and traced shipments of equipment from Iran and Venezuela. The secret was out. The blueprint of defiance. Soon after, the telltale signs of gold lit up on their screens. By then, Burkina Faso had already begun reclaiming control of its mines, quietly expelling G7-backed contractors and replacing French and American-controlled companies with national military units. Revenue no longer flowed to Paris. It was redirected into a domestic sovereign and development fund. The G7 and the IMF knew exactly what this meant. This was a nation rich in gold, not managed by Wall Street, not answering to Paris, and not bowing to the G7. It was backed by its own people, its own army, and its own vision. This wasn't just defiance, it was a blueprint, and it terrified them. They didn't just want the gold, they wanted to kill the idea itself before another African nation dared to follow suit. Phone calls began to fly between power brokers across the West, all asking the same question. How do we stop this before it becomes another Libya, but this time, African-owned. Their answer was to use the West's influence, to use Trump's blunt force. The goal? To make Traoré kneel. But the man they chose would not kneel. When the message reached Ouagadougou, it was devoid of any diplomatic pretense. Wrapped in arrogance, the language of empire disguised as business, the G7 delivered it as if it were a business proposal. But there was no mistake. This was extortion. The demands were listed in a document marked Debt Recovery Strategy Framework. Its content was anything but subtle. 70% of Burkina Faso's gold production was to be handed over to U.S. mining giants and IMF-appointed managers, labeled as gradual debt repayment. Control of all major gold export routes was to be transferred to U.S.-approved intermediaries. The message was clear. Your resources are ours. Your sovereignty is a luxury you cannot afford. The final gambit. The demands were clear. An American advisory board would oversee all new mining contracts and revenue distribution. In return, there were promises of military security, technology partnerships, and protection from regime change, a thinly veiled threat. The message was simple: pay us or pay the ultimate price. At the top of the document, a handwritten note in thick red ink sealed the deal. Traoré has 48 hours. This was more than just economic colonialism. It was imperialism 4.0, brazen, naked, and direct. Among the 19 IMF member nations, the so-called neutral elite, it tried to appear calm, claiming Trump was acting on his own. Yet, behind closed doors, no one stopped him. Because deep down, Trump was only saying aloud what they had been thinking for years. We don't care who runs Africa, as long as we control what is under the ground. Captain Ibrahim Traoré understood the message perfectly, and he had already made his decision. No foreign power will dictate the future of our land, he declared. If this was a power game, Traoré was ready to play, not as a pawn, but as a sovereign leader representing a sovereign nation. Trump had just threatened the wrong soldier. When the ultimatum landed in Burkina Faso's war room, Traoré didn't flinch. He read the letter twice, then calmly set it aside. Standing up, he said flatly, "So, this is how they collect a debt, poison in a suit and tie." He didn't hesitate. He lit a fire. They wanted 70% of his country's future. He would give them 100% of its resistance. He didn't call the G7 or the IMF. He called the commander of the Special Sovereignty Force, a covert military unit created for exactly this moment. Orders were issued swiftly and decisively. A fire ignited. The orders were given: lock down every oil field, double security on all gold convoys, and cut off all data flows to foreign contractors. Prepare the national broadcast. A statement was coming. By noon, the entire country was watching. The screen went black, then a live feed appeared. There was no lavish studio, no flashy production, just Traoré in his uniform, one hand on the Burkinabe flag, the other holding a folder stamped Burkina Faso, 48 hours to repay debt. His voice was steady, his gaze razor sharp. To the people of Burkina Faso and to our brothers and sisters across Africa, he began, they are not just demanding debt payments from us, nor are they simply demanding 70% of our gold. What they truly seek is the fear within us. He paused, and the room went silent. To those behind this insult, to Mr. Trump and his supporters, you have underestimated us. We are not Libya. We are not Iraq. We are not your playground. We will never surrender our land to repay the debts you have imposed. We will never bow to your weapons or your banks. You gave us 2 days. Here is our answer. Now you have 2 days to take your greed, your threats, and your arrogance and leave African soil. He stood, saluted, and walked off the screen. No questions, no deals, no surrender. While Traoré's speech was met with cheers from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, another kind of storm was quietly forming. In oil company boardrooms and intelligence offices, panic spread. At ExxonMobil, emergency calls went out to Washington. At Halliburton, teams scrambled to measure the damage. And at CIA headquarters in Langley, alarms sounded. Traoré hadn't just refused to give in. He had spoken out publicly. And that was the real problem, the domino effect. If Burkina Faso could say no and still win, what would stop Mali, Niger, Chad, or Congo from doing the same? The pressure intensified fast. CIA agents were seen more frequently across West Africa. Drones flew more missions over Burkina Faso's gold routes. On social media, smear campaigns spread, painting Traoré as unstable, reckless, and even crazy. Near the Ghanaian border, private military contractors tied to a known intelligence firm were seen moving in. The message from Washington was clear: this must end now. But Traoré's message had already been heard across the continent. Africa is not for sale. The plan against him was simple: create internal chaos. Simultaneously, major Western news networks began broadcasting the same story. They claimed Traoré was leading his country into disaster by refusing to pay its debts. Yet, the truth on the ground in Burkina Faso was very different. More people were volunteering to guard the gold mines. The resistance wasn't just military, it was cultural and community-driven, growing stronger every hour. University students held events on national sovereignty and the fair use of resources. Women's groups brought food and supplies to soldiers protecting the mines. Every time CNN or Fox News launched an attack, the younger generation didn't get angry. They laughed. They reposted the news clips with a single line: "If they hate him this much, he must be doing something right." Captain Ibrahim Traoré knew the truth. The real enemy wasn't just Trump, it was the entire system. The banks, the oil companies, the G7, the IMF, and the old colonial powers that had been taking from Africa for generations. Now, that very system was attacking one man because he had done something no one expected. He had said no, and he meant it. Burkina Faso was under attack politically, economically, and digitally. But Traoré was not alone. L'épopée, the African shield. Just days after openly rejecting the ultimatum from Trump and the IMF, 3 military planes landed in Ouagadougou. There were no bombs, no weapons, only brothers. From Mali came Colonel Assimi Goïta, calm and steady. From Niger came General Abdourahmane Tiani, his eyes burning with determination. From Guinea came Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, walking tall and unapologetic. They entered the presidential palace together. When they emerged, they stood side by side, with Traoré for the entire world to see. Then came the words that shook the continent: "If you touch Burkina Faso, you touch all of us." This wasn't just a statement, it was a new doctrine, Africa's answer to NATO, the AES shield. Mali sent experienced military advisors to guard the gold mines. Niger deployed logistics teams skilled in desert terrain. Guinea opened its airspace for emergency supply flights. The fight wasn't confined to the ground, it moved online. AES-backed media launched a massive counteroffensive, exposing Western disinformation and revealing the truth behind the resource war. Social media was flooded with one unified message: our resources, our future, our fight. The impact spread quickly. In Bamako, crowds filled the streets to support Traoré. In Conakry, murals appeared showing him standing on oil barrels, holding the Burkinabe flag high. Even in Chad and the Central African Republic, youth groups chanted, "AES or death." In the West, intelligence agencies scrambled to respond, but they had missed one crucial point. This was no longer just about Burkina Faso. This was a Pan-African firewall, and Traoré wasn't backing down. He was moving forward, supported by a brotherhood built not from treaties, but from shared history, betrayal, and a common dream of true African freedom. While Western powers grew angry and panicked behind closed doors, 2 global giants made their move, quietly, strategically, and without apology. A new axis, China and Russia, arrived without threats or arrogance. They brought something much stronger: support, technology, and a message Captain Traoré would never forget: you are not alone. Just 12 hours after Trump's ultimatum hit the news, a discreet Chinese delegation landed in Ouagadougou. There were no cameras, no fanfare, just engineers, diplomats, and a game-changing proposal: a fully operational gold mining facility to be built in 90 days, a gold valuation system that completely bypassed Western banks, and a digital trade platform using China's digital yuan, cutting out both the CFA franc and the US dollar. Burkina Faso would not only own its gold, it would control every step of the value chain. Russia followed immediately. The next day, a Russian Ilyushin military jet landed on a secure airstrip. On board were advanced electronic warfare systems and dozens of unmarked crates labeled special defense assets. In other words, Burkina Faso's gold mines were now protected by Russian-grade anti-drone defenses. Washington was stunned. CNN called it a dangerous new alliance. The U.S. State Department accused Traoré of selling out to dictatorships. But in Africa, no one cared what the West thought. To the people, Traoré wasn't bowing. He was fighting back. To them, China and Russia weren't invaders. They were tools. And the AES was the future, a future free from colonial chains. By this point, Traoré had achieved what many thought impossible. He had rejected a U.S. ultimatum, exposed a global resource grab, and brought China, Russia, and half of West Africa to his side. In the U.S., the media went into full panic mode. CNN flashed its red headline, "Burkina Faso refuses to pay dirty debt." Fox News declared, "Traoré must be stopped." Talk shows filled with guests, IMF-linked bank CEOs and retired generals, all repeating the same word, dangerous. They called him crazy, a dictator, Putin's puppet, and the next Gaddafi, a symbol, a movement. But the internet wasn't buying it. African content creators flooded YouTube and Instagram with videos praising his courage. Even African Americans joined the chorus. "This man told Trump, 'over my dead body,' and lived to tell the story," one video declared. "That's leadership. Pay attention." In Burkina Faso, young people fought back in their own way. They took CNN's fear-filled clips and remixed them into protest songs. They wore t-shirts that read, "If CNN hates you, you must be doing something right." Traoré was no longer just a president. He had become a symbol, a viral figure, a movement. Even Time magazine took notice. Their next digital cover read, "The man the West can't bully," inside Traoré's African uprising. Fame, however, came with risk. The more headlines that carried his name, the more threats began to pile up. Private intelligence firms launched cyber attacks. Social media bots pushed fake scandals and smear campaigns. In Washington's closed-door meetings, the old whispers returned, accusations of debt dodging and instability. But none of it mattered. The people saw exactly what was going on. Traoré had broken the script. He wasn't supposed to fight back. He wasn't supposed to survive. And he definitely wasn't supposed to go viral. Yet here he was, a 35-year-old soldier from Ouagadougou, more famous than most Western presidents. He had no PR team or billionaire backers, just truth, courage, and gold. Time was running out. The whole world watched. Would Traoré agree to hand over 70% of Burkina Faso's gold to pay down the debt? Instead, when the two-day deadline expired, Traoré made his boldest move yet. At dawn, Burkina Faso's National Assembly held an emergency session, completely hidden from outside eyes. The final stand behind closed doors, under Traoré's direct orders, the National Assembly passed a historic resolution. All gold reserves within Burkina Faso are hereby nationalized and permanently protected from all forms of foreign corporate ownership. The ink had barely dried before the decree was in force. By sunrise, every Western company still operating on Burkinabe soil received the same message. Pack your bags, your game here is over. Licenses held by French and Canadian mining firms were revoked. A G7 and IMF-backed energy survey team was escorted to the border. Foreign diplomats were informed in plain words. Burkina Faso's resources are not a bargaining chip for debt repayment. Traoré then appeared on national television. No uniform, no weapons, dressed only in traditional Burkinabe attire. His voice was steady and unwavering. "We've been exploited for generations," he said. "Now that we've discovered our wealth, they want to take it away again. But I am not here to serve empires. I am here to serve my people, a people who have suffered far too long." He paused for a long moment. Then came the line that echoed from radios to rooftops. "Burkina Faso is not afraid, and I will not negotiate with thieves." Outside, the streets erupted, drums pounded, fireworks lit the sky, and crowds danced and chanted through the capital. "He said no! He said no! He said no!" Online, the movement caught fire again. Young Africans posted videos holding fuel, soil, or coins and whispered one phrase: We protect what's ours. The IMF's ultimatum had expired. The threat had failed. Traoré didn't just survive the pressure, he rewrote the rules. 2 days after his bold challenge, the G7 and IMF went silent. No press briefings, no tweets, just quiet panic behind closed doors. There were nervous whispers in military offices and real alarm bells in oil boardrooms. Then, at exactly 7:42 a.m. Eastern Time, Donald J. Trump broke the silence with an all-caps tweet. Traoré just made the biggest mistake of his life. Africa will pay for this. The internet exploded. Journalists scrambled for reactions. A final, resounding defiance, cable news turned into shouting matches. Markets in New York dipped as investors braced for the worst. But in Ouagadougou, Captain Traoré didn't flinch. When aides showed him the tweet, he reportedly smiled and said, "That's the sound of an empire losing control." Still, the threat was real. Satellite activity over West Africa tripled. The U.S. Navy quietly moved 2 warships closer to the Gulf of Guinea. AFRICOM issued a discreet warning about rising instability. Burkina Faso's military acted fast. Anti-air defenses went live, and gold transport routes were sealed off. The AES allies moved instantly. Mali sent armored units to the border. Niger activated air defense radar to monitor shared skies. Guinea announced a joint rapid response pact, promising immediate retaliation against any foreign attack on Burkina Faso. Then came the shock that stunned the world. This was no longer just about governments. Ordinary people across Africa rose up. In Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Senegal, thousands gathered outside U.S. embassies. These weren't ordinary protests. They were warnings. Signs read, "Touch Traoré and you touch all of us. Africa is not your minefield. Keep your democracy. We'll keep our dignity." In Washington, Trump was reportedly furious that his pressure campaign had failed. But the final blow didn't come from any government. It came from a video just 43 seconds long. A video from Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself that went global within hours. Looking straight into the camera, calm and steady, he said, "This is not just about debt. This is not just about gold. This is about the soul of Africa, and I would rather die standing than live kneeling." Within 12 hours, the video had been shared over 12 million times. Former African presidents began speaking out, breaking years of silence. One by one, they called Traoré the beginning of a new era, a new kind of leader. The world held its breath. But for Africa, it was the first deep breath of freedom in a very, very long time.